Solomon. Dr. Solomon is the author of the Book of Trust and 12 more books, 22 patents, more than 300 articles, and was one of the creators of Wi-Fi and USB 3.0. With all of that, he never gets to go outside and play. Named one of the top 40 innovation bloggers and one of the top 20 global thought leaders on corporate culture and emerging technologies. He is a TEDx speaker and was one of the first 5 to become a certified virtual presenter. Since the COVID-19 pandemic has started, he delivered more than 30 virtual presentations to audiences of between 25 and more than 2,000. I bet they're like little dots on the screen when you put that many in Zoom. Yoram is also an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at the Southern Methodist University. His His trustworthiness model includes the 8 laws of trust, the 6 components of trustworthiness, and he offers his customers a 7-step action plan that allows people and organizations to be more trusted and know who to trust. It is based on years of original research, years of service as an elected official and as an executive, and service as at the IDF 35th Airborne Brigade. Good morning, Yoram. How are you today?
Well, when you started, it was morning. Right now, it looks like it's early afternoon. But good morning to you too, Ron.
It's so great to see you. I got to tell you, I've really been looking forward to this conversation with you because you and I think, share an awful lot in common when it comes to the topic of trust, especially as it relates to working with customers and in sales and all of those things. And we're going to get to all of that. But I want to start with what led you, how did you start on this journey of being interested in trust?
Well, it was a rainy day in January of 1965, and my mother felt that the baby is coming. Oh, well, you probably want a later part of that story.
Jump a little bit ahead.
Yeah, 30 years ago, if you would have, I worked as an engineer, and if you would have told me that I would be talking about trust 30 years later, I would have thought that you're crazy. But being an engineer, and a big part of it was related to the way I was brought, the way I was taught to think, and I was a very individual thinker, and I would say a creative thinker. And so to me, I was fascinated always with creativity and with innovation. And as I moved along, at some point I decided that there wasn't enough that I was innovative. I wanted to help others be innovative, whether it's individuals or companies, organizations. And I started helping organizations. I think the first time was, gosh, I don't remember the year, but an organization reached out to me with the statement, "We heard that you're a guru on innovation," which, good to know that that's what people think of me, people I never met before. And they asked me to come in and help them build this workshop on innovation and come up with ideas. So we did that. We did a full-day workshop. And at the end of that workshop, as I was driving home, I thought to myself, they don't have an issue of enough ideas or good enough ideas. The issue they have is that all of those ideas we came up with today, nothing's going to happen because they don't have the right culture to take those ideas all the way to fruition, or they don't have the culture to generate more of those ideas.
Right.
And that's when I started being more fascinated by the culture of innovation. There was also the time when I worked on my my PhD dissertation, and my mentor was trying to have me come up with an impressive topic, and I was shooting low. I was aiming pretty low because I just wanted to be done.
Right.
One thing that universities would tell you is that a good dissertation is a done dissertation. And so I'm coming up with ideas. He keeps shooting them down, and at some point he asked me, and I was getting increasingly annoyed with him. I'm starting to think that maybe I should have another mentor. And at some point, he asked me a pivotal question. I mean, this is one of those pivotal questions in your life. He asked me, "What pisses you off?" And I wanted to say, "Well, I'm trying to come up with topics and you don't let me." But the words that came out of my mouth were, why are people so much more creative when they work in startups than when they work in large, mature companies? Because, you know, I started startups myself. I sold startups, bought startups. At that time, I was working for Texas Instruments, a company that with 35,000 employees was anything but a startup. There was quite on the other side of the line. And then he said, I think we have a topic. So I spent the next 2 years researching, understanding what makes a culture of, or I wouldn't say what makes a culture of innovation, what makes people more creative. And to summarize it, to put it in just one word, it's innovation culture. It's actually 2 words if you put the space in between them. I don't like to put the space in between them.
Or so if you hyphenate, it's 1 word,
Yeah. So innovation culture. And in 2017, I was publishing a book called Culture Starts With You, Not Your Boss. And the book was being edited at that time. And as the book was edited, I was meeting with a client, and in 20 minutes of me trying to sell them on the importance of innovation culture, the elements of innovation culture, autonomy, accountability, the ability to hold a constructive disagreement, vulnerability, willingness to give feedback, direct feedback, and receptivity to feedback. As I'm trying to explain this to them, and I can see that this is just not going to work with them, what I realized was that what was missing there was trust. Trust was the foundation. And what I realized is that although working on innovation is important, it's like starting to build a building from the second floor. Innovation culture is on the first floor. Trust is the foundation. And so the book came back from editing, and I wrote another 6-page chapter. This was the first time I talked about trust. A 6-page chapter that never got edited. So if you get this book, if there are typos in that chapter, that's because that chapter never got edited. I edited the chapter, sent it out, the book got printed. I talked to 20 of my closest friends and I asked them, you know, in general, I've been leaning always or talking, speaking, working in the area of innovation. And now all of a sudden there's this trusting. What do you think? Should I stick with innovation or pivot to trust? 19 out of my 20 friends said, stick with innovation. But then I realized that they're leading me to their comfort zone, not mine. And I needed to get out of my comfort zone. And so 19 out of 20 said, stick with innovation. So I moved to trust and never went back.
Well, and it's funny because as I've watched some of your videos and presentations and such and listened to you at different times, you've made me realize, because I speak on customer experience, and you made me realize how much more creativity plays into business in general, innovation in general. I mean, if you, as an example for customer experience, I mean, if you want to keep delivering amazing customer experience that brings people back, then you have to be different than every other business out there. And the way you're different is to innovate an idea or create an idea that is so different that people just can't help themselves but be attracted to your business. And so that's something I'm learning from you. And I'm thinking, wow, it's all coming together. Now, in that innovation culture, I know you say it's actually made up of 3 different elements. It's made up, correct me if I'm wrong, because I told you before we started today, I am a student of Yoram for the past few days. So innovation culture it consists of autonomy, accountability, and constructive disagreement, correct? Which is a lot like brainstorming in a way. What you're talking about is giving people the opportunity to come up with ideas and to be accountable from the standpoint of is that they have the autonomy to come up with these ideas and then be accountable for, I guess, whether they pass or fail in that regard, but also be able to accept. Is criticism the right word? Am I going the right way with that, or is it some other word?
You know, I refer to it as feedback, and it's interesting because just recently I incorporated feedback as part of it, and I told you that your ability to hold a constructive disagreement is, and here's an interesting part, by the way. I conducted a lot of surveys since I started working on that and refined it better. Right. One of the things I found was I started asking people about their attitudes towards disagreement. You know, is it uncomfortable? You're trying to avoid it. It is not productive, or you feel that you can hold a disagreement and remain professional, or you can hold a passionate disagreement and stay friends. And the story there was, I was at an Einstein Brothers once, and there are a couple of Israelis sitting by the window, and you know, they were arguing and they were raising their voices. And I was probably the only other person at that Einstein Brothers who understood what they said, because I speak Hebrew. And, you know, they're raising their voices and they're raising their voices and they're starting to use their outside voices. And people started moving away from them, creating some kind of a demilitarized zone around them. But I can hear this is not personal. This is completely professional. They're arguing over something that they're doing at work, and they have obviously opposite positions on it, but this was not personal, and it was amazing to me how so many Americans can't do that. And so I started breaking down what are the components of your ability to hold that kind of disagreement. The first part is your willingness to be vulnerable. And I would even say voluntarily vulnerable, because sometimes we force people to be vulnerable when they're not ready to be vulnerable. So it's your willingness to ask stupid questions. You know, one of my pet peeves is that statement. You know, if somebody asks you, can I ask a stupid question? It's almost the automatic response to that is, there ain't such a thing as a stupid question. Yes, there is. 80% of my questions are stupid. 93.7% of my ideas are stupid. But the thing is that when you tell me that there is no such a thing, then, you know, you're glorifying a stupid idea, which you shouldn't. And I should be willing to be vulnerable to get your feedback. Feedback is the second part. It's your willingness to provide direct, unfiltered feedback. You know, let's not do it outside of this room. Let's not do it behind somebody's back. You know, the definition, and then there's the receptivity for that kind of feedback. And the definition of, I call it negative feedback. I don't like the phrase constructive feedback, because I think what we're trying, even though it should be constructive, I think what we're trying to do is, you know, let's not call it negative, because negative sounds, well, negative. No, it's negative feedback. Here's what I believe, strongly believe. One, positive feedback makes you feel better about yourself. Negative feedback makes you better.
Let's talk a little bit about customers. Why are they loyal to businesses, and why are they not loyal to businesses?
Well, so I did something interesting. I think this was in 2018. I started a survey. I got, I believe, 363 participants. And I asked a very simple question. Before I even send it out as a survey, I asked this: what is the most important quality for you in other people? And I gave 6 types of people: your boss, your employees, your colleagues or peers, a salesperson trying to sell you something, your government representative, and your spouse. I left it open-ended, say whatever comes to mind, and I got all those words, and you know, some of them had the same meaning, so I combined them, consolidated them, and so on. And I got to the top 5. You want to know what's in number 5? Number 5 of the top 5 qualities that we appreciate or think are very important in another person. Number 5, looks good. Good looks is number 5, 0.83%. 3 of 363 people said that good looks was the number 1 quality for them in other people. Fortunately enough, it's only 3 in 363. Number 1, undisputed, 61.2%, trustworthiness. And so it was interesting, and you know, number 2 was actually willingness to work hard, which I'll talk about that if we get to talk about leadership, and then intelligence, and then willingness to take risk. Actually, in second place, willingness to take risk was only true for employees talking about their bosses, and if you ask me about that, I'll tell you more. But you asked me about salespeople. Trustworthiness ranked the highest in salespeople. 76.7% of people, 3 out of 4 people said number 1 quality for them in salespeople trying to sell them something was trustworthiness. And I thought, that's interesting. Let's see if you're willing to put your money where your mouth is. So I did another study, and in the other study, I want to be careful when I call it study. It's not study that met that met the high requirements of an IRB committee and a PhD dissertation, but it was good enough to get a low margin of error to know that the results I'm getting are true.
Better than a Facebook poll.
Better than a Facebook poll. Yes, true. And I do Facebook polls, and I don't like that they stop at 40, but that's okay. So, yeah, I asked 76.7% trustworthiness in salespeople. Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? And so I presented a scenario, and the scenario was like this. Somebody comes into your house, you want to do a home renovation project. Let's estimate it at about $10,000. You do your research online, you're down to 2 companies, you invite both of them to come in, take measurements, and give you a quote. And as they come in, the first one, you know, he's not or she is not, they're not just trying to get the sale done. I mean, you can see that they care about you. This is the owner of the business. They have very good reviews. They've been in business for 20 years. And they start doing the measurements, and you want to do something, and they go, you know what, I can do that for you. It's actually going to cost more money. But here's something we can do that I think would look better. I think you would think it looks better, and it's actually going to be cheaper. I can do what you want. In 20 minutes of that description, they establish themselves as trustworthy. Right. The second person comes in and just boom, boom, boom. You know, I'm in it for the sale. I want to get my commission, and I'm out of here. 3 months ago, I was selling used cars. 2 months from now, I will be selling used cars. You know what I mean? And so establish themselves as not so trustworthy. And then I asked a simple question. They both submitted their quotes. Both quotes are for exactly the same price, $10,000. Which one would you take? 100% the trustworthy one. Not 99%, not 99.5%. 100% would take the trustworthy one. Okay, that makes sense. What if the trustworthy person asks for a 10% higher price? Now we're at 11,000 versus 10,000. 100%. 100% of people would pay 10% more. How about 20%? Well, now we're starting to decline. We were at 54%, a 20% higher price, and we were, I believe, at 21% of people at 50% higher price, 15,000 versus 10. I still had 21% willing to pay. Well, those are probably 21% of people, the 21% to whom 15,000 is not a big deal, because that's part of that plays a role there. However, then I had a large group, a very large group, even at 50%, who said it's still going to be one of them, and only a smaller group said at 50% higher, I'm not buying from the trustworthy one, and I'm not buying from the untrustworthy one either. So I'm just not going to do it. Once I put this all into a formula, the number that I got is that statement that you told me about before. If you're a trustworthy salesperson selling against an untrustworthy salesperson, right, just to be on the break-even point, you can raise your prices 29.6% and you still get the deal. It looks worse, by the way, from the other direction. If you don't care about your salespeople being trustworthy, just know that to stay in the game, you have to discount your prices 22.8% against somebody else, another company, another salesperson who is trustworthy. There's significant money involved in this.
Yeah, and I think what happens to a lot of people is that they don't associate that trust is actually, to me, the level of trust you have is directly proportionate to the level of the relationship you have with the customer or with whoever you're working with. Because if there is no relationship, then there is no trust. If there is no trust, then there is no relationship. They kind of go hand in hand. And what I believe from a customer experience point of view is that relationship starts with 4 little words. Tell me about yourself. Or as you were talking about with a remodeler, let's talk about more detail about what it is that you want rather than just going for, okay, I'm just going to do whatever it is you want me to do and let's get your signature on the contract. Let me, you're hiring me for my expertise. Allow me to demonstrate a little of that expertise by giving you some ideas that I think that are actually going to make your life better rather than being something that's just going to pretty much keep it the same. But you know what? I got the check. So that's all that really matters.
Let me just refine this. You said a relationship. There are bad relationships too.
Oh yeah.
It's really a matter of how you define the word relationship. And a relationship is we know each other and we're interacting with one another. Therefore, we're in a relationship. Well, then there are bad relationships as well. So to me, trust, and this is the model that I built. And I think if you looked at the book, you saw, or I sometimes I bring it up, I flash it up there as one of the. I wonder if I have it yes, behind me. What you see behind me, that's the mathematical model for trust. And, you're laughing, but I'm serious. I really did build a mathematical model to how trust gets built. I have not verified it yet with enough experimentation, and it is complex enough so that this is going to be a Herculean effort. But I do believe that there are 6 components. And the funny thing is, back in 2017, when I wrote that 6-page chapter in Culture Starts With You, Not Your Boss, that chapter that's called Trust, I actually identified exactly the same 6 components. And 3 of them, if I take it to the financial world, you know how you have the two major financial reports that a company has are the balance sheet, which is what we currently have, right, and the profit and loss or income statement, which are the changes to what we currently have. Of course, over there, we only talk about money, but here I'm talking about 3 components: your competence, shared values, and fairness or symmetry of that relationship. Right. Those are those 3 components. And then in every interaction, trust is dynamic. And there are 2 components that are new to my approach to how trust is, or what trust is, and how it changes and how it builds. One of them is that trust is relative. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. But the other is that trust is dynamic. Trust changes all the time. Think about that relationship. That relationship that you had with that salesperson actually started before they showed up. Because you didn't just dial a random number and hope that the person on the other side can do the job that you want them to do. You did your research online. There were reviews. There were other things. There was a short video where you could actually see the person who is about to come. You could see their face. You could see certain things. So that relationship started before they ever rang your doorbell. But once they came in, that was the biggest impact swing in the level of trust you had in them. And the 3 components that change during an interaction are: 1, the positivity, what they bring into that interaction. That's made of 2 things: how much BS do they use, and how self-centered they are. It's as simple as that. That is multiplied, and I could say accelerated, by the amount of time they spend with you and the intimacy of that time. And when I say intimacy, before this becomes an R-rated podcast, what I mean is, are you communicated using words only, words and tone of voice, and body language or facial expressions? Because you'll be amazed at how I can reinforce my message by having consistent body language that supports it. Or I can completely destroy the message by having body language that's completely the opposite.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that in one of your other conversations, and how the things that you can control that's one thing that you can, the thing that you can control the most are the words that you use. Am I right on that?
Wow, you did your research.
Yes, I did.
So it's an interesting dichotomy. You have the words that you use, especially if you use them, let's call it asynchronously. So an email, a text message, and so on. You are very much in control. Nobody sees what you feel. Nobody sees what your expressions are when you're writing it. And you have the opportunity to correct it and change it and edit it and modify it and finally send it. You're in total control. Body language and tone of voice, you're almost not in control of them. And so it's a two-edged sword of when I'm going to meet with you and it's going to be face-to-face, so you get the full experience, the words, tone of voice, body language. If the body language, if the nonverbal communications are supportive of the words that I'm using, trust goes through the roof. If they are contradicting the words that I use, Albert Moravian is the person that coined the 730-855 rule, and I'm not going to go there and the words, tone of voice, body language. I'm not going to go there. He himself said that he was misquoted, and we can argue on how he did his experiments. But he said something in the introduction to that book, Silent Messages, that 1971 book. He said that when your body language or when your words and your nonverbal communications contradict each other, people mistrust you. So have body language, have the full experience, words, tone, body language, facial expressions. If they're consistent, man, do you build trust. If they're inconsistent, whoosh, trust goes. So it's a double-edged sword, but you know what? I would always trust people who meet me face to face so I can tell for myself if they are trusted or not.
That's why I always encourage whenever possible, if you can. I mean, it's nice for an inquiry rather than trying to sell over the phone. If you can do something like this, or better yet, if you can do it in person, obviously in today's world, that's a little bit more challenging. But at least in this way, we have, you and I have an opportunity to look at each other, and you could probably tell from my facial expressions that I'm into what you're talking about, which tells you that, okay, then I'm following down this right path. Same thing's true with the customer. If I can look at a customer's face, I know whether am I making contact here, or are they just, what do I need to do to adjust in order to reach them better? Let's talk a little bit about the 8 laws of trust. Now, I thought there was only 7. I just learned today there is now 8. So somewhere along the line, we added a new law of trust. So could you run through those real quick and what they mean?
I have no idea. Yeah, so in my book, the book of trust, my latest book, what I focused on several areas. One of them is, how does trust behave? I look at trust as a thing, and that thing has behaviors. And I started categorizing them. And, that 8th law was always there. It was just, I never referred to it as a law. I just said, my model is dynamic, until at some point I said, well, let's just call it a law. Trust is dynamic. It's not that the model is dynamic. Trust is dynamic. And I mentioned that just a few minutes ago. But the first one, for example, is that trust is continuous. We ask this question, do you trust me? And the question is, trust me, how much do I need to trust you? I remember once I had an audience of about 500. I was standing on stage, and I wanted to explain the first law of trust. Trust is continuous. And I asked, I left my wallet at home, which unfortunately happens every now and then. My car is in the parking garage. I need a $20 bill to get my car out of the parking garage. Is there anybody here willing to lend me $20? And I promise, as soon as I get home, I'll put a $20 bill in an envelope and mail it to you. And anybody willing to lend me $20? Well, pretty much everybody raised their hands. And I said, how about 100? What if I ask for 100? So, half the hands are up and half are down. How about 1,000? All the hands are down except one. There's one person in the back. I don't know her. I never met her before. And her hand is up there, $1,000. And I'm like, wow, $2,000. She raises her hand again. I'm like, before I go home today, I just need to make sure that I have her name, telephone number, email address, because whenever I'm stuck and I need $2,000, that's the person to call. But the thing is, you see how it is. You trust me with $20. What do you have to lose? But not with 100, not with 1,000. So it's continuous. It's also contextual. So, do you trust me? The next question needs to be, trust you with what? Do you trust the pilot on your airplane to fly the plane? Yes, I do. Well, maybe. Yes, I do. I trust the pilot to fly the plane. Do I trust them to operate on me in an operating room? Not so much. So it's contextual. Trust is relative. And this is important. You mentioned that I teach in the college. Actually, it's in a graduate school. And in that course, I remember once I looked at my daughters. Both my daughters are in college. One of them is about to graduate from college. And before they take a class, they go to a website called Rate My Professors.
Uh-oh.
So I'm like, so students just post ratings and so on? They said yes. Do I have a page like this? And they said, let's check. So we check out Southern Methodist University, Yoram Solomon. Yes, I have a page. And I'm starting to look at there. And the first one I see is I get a 5 out of 5. This professor is awesome. Take his classes. He shares his experience and so on. And do you think I'm telling you this to brag? Well, actually, yeah, that's the number one reason. But the second reason is, do you think that I'm telling you this to recruit students to my class? Actually, that would be the second reason. But the third reason is because I want to tell you about another review that I got. And the other review was I got a 1 out of 5.
Uh-oh.
And it starts with AW, but instead of awesome, they said that I'm awful. So, I'm arrogant and condescending, and I'm not using peer-reviewed material and so on and so forth. Here's the crazy thing. You look at the dates when those were posted and the course that those students attended, because they're anonymous, so I can't tell who the students are. Those two students sat at the same classroom at the same time, watching the same person give the same thing, and got such different reviews, because trust is relative. It is relative to every single relationship. You and I, Ron, have one relationship, and it's different than the relationship that I have with other people and that you have with other people. Trust is asymmetrical. We like to say that trust is a two-way street. It is a two-way street, but it's not symmetrical. Do you think that if you trust the pilot who flies your plane, they need to trust you to fly that plane? No, it's asymmetrical. Trust is transferable. If you trust me and I tell you that this other person is trustworthy, you may not trust them as much as you trust me or as much as I trust them, but more than nothing, it's transferable. One of the questions I ask is, did your parents, when you were a kid, did they tell you never enter a car with a stranger? Right?
Right.
They did. Yet you do. You enter an Uber. You don't know anything about that driver. Why do you do that? Because of the 973 reviews of other people who you trust. Trust is reciprocal, and that's one of the most powerful things, because we like to think of it in one direction. If I'm trustworthy, you will trust me, right? That's the relationship. It's actually completely reciprocal. If you trust me and you show me that you trust me, I will behave in a trustworthy way to justify it, because otherwise my brain is going to have cognitive dissonance. Trust is dynamic. I already mentioned that. It changes through interactions. It's actually dropping between interactions as a defense mechanism. And finally, trust is two-sided. For you to trust me, you need to have trustability, willingness to trust other people, and I have to be trustworthy. I can't do anything about your willingness to trust other people, your trustability. I can only work, but I can do everything about my own trustworthiness, which is why the focus of my model is how does a person become more trusted? How do they become more trustworthy?
Yeah, and it's funny, all 8 of those are extremely important, but for some reason, trust is reciprocal is the one that stands out the most to me, because I don't know, I feel like that is to me, that's almost got it like the number one, because even in, again, customer experience is that it's not just about trust, it's about doing something special for people. If I do something nice for you, okay, here's maybe a great example. Yorm, you have been posting videos like crazy on
I haven't.
on how to make OBS work, and I've been watching all of those videos because I'm trying to learn this process. And you've been doing all these nice things and posting these videos, and I don't know when the opportunity is going to come about, but whenever the opportunity comes up where you say, "Hey, Ron, could you help me with this thing?" I'm going to be right there for you, because again, it's reciprocal. You've done something for me. And the same thing is true with customers. Customers, if you do something nice for them, if you do something that's going to make a difference in their lives, let's put it that way, then they're going to be more likely to reciprocate, especially when it comes to that review process. They're not going to give you that one-star review like Yoram gets all the time, but they're going to give you more of the 5-star reviews, or they're going to say nicer things about you in those reviews, or they're going to tell their friends how wonderful you were. It's, again, sharing that trust with others, so that people are going to be more likely to trust you as well.
And it's a very delicate thing, because and Robert Cialdini, if you're familiar with his work on influence, sure. To him, one of his 6 pillars is reciprocity, and he talks about, you do good things happen to you. I actually did that with my daughters when they were babies. I kept pushing them to do good things. I think one of the biggest parts of it is the immediacy of that reciprocity. If you do something nice, but with a very clear, here's what I need back, and I need this back immediately, it's not as powerful as if you do something nice and you really don't expect anything in return.
Right.
And that's my students know that I keep telling them the course that I teach now, actually tomorrow is the 2nd week of the new semester. And what I teach them is, I teach them how to build a business, how to start a business, how to write a business plan. One of the things that I tell them always is, our relationship does not end at the end of this course. I will always be happy to, keep using me as a sounding board, keep calling me if you want to start a business. I'm not asking anything in return. You can't be asking for something in return, because then it's not genuine. Then it's a transaction. I do something, you do something. So you have to. that my channel on YouTube is not monetized, so it's not like there are ads that come up when you watch my videos. That's fine. That's not doing it for anything.
And it's not just the videos you post. I mean, I know I put comments in. I've reached out to you individually and said, "Hey, can you help me?" I watched your video, which, I imagine it gets frustrating for people that haven't really watched your video to ask you questions. But I do. I watch the videos, and then I come back with a question, and you've always been so responsive. But again, it kind of just reinforces this whole idea of it being reciprocal. And as I said, for some reason, that of all the 8, that one stands out the most to me. And it may be, I don't know, have you ever studied to see if there's one of those 8 laws that stands out with some people more than it does with others, kind of like it does with me?
I think, first of all 8 of them are at play at any point in time. I think that you may see that their trust is reciprocal as something that's easy to talk about and so on. But if you think about every one of the others, same thing. I mean, they're all very, very powerful. Right. One interesting thing, when you talked about doing things for other people, I just recently came across a study that was done in Canada in 2017. I think it was 3 professors, and they used the World Values Survey. So I think it's just worldvaluesurvey.org. And they collect values. They did their research for many, many years. They keep on doing surveys, very long surveys. I'm surprised how many people they get to answer those surveys. But one of their findings was that we became self-centered over time, and they took a period of 51 years between 1960 and 2011 in 78 countries, and they found that the level of self-centrism, both in practices and values, increased 12% on average. Now, you may think, well, 12% over 51 years, what's the big deal? When you isolate the English-speaking countries, I don't need to spell who those are to you, right? English-speaking countries, the number is not 12%, it's 60 to 69% increase in our self-centrism, how self-centered we are. And if you want to be trusted, remember, one of the components in an interaction is the positivity, what you put into it. Right. And it's the amount of BS that you bring and how self-centered you are. And that's unfortunately on the rise.
Wow. So I'm so enjoying this conversation. But unfortunately, we're going to run out of time if we're not careful. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to jump ahead. I want to jump to the 5 strategies for trust building, because I think these are ever so important for anybody that's watching right now. Because if you're in sales, if you're in business, or if you're just a parent, building trust, it is so important. So what are the 5 strategies, Yoram, for people that want to build trust with others?
So actually, since I wrote about 5, there are now 10, and in fact, they're okay, 187. Yes, they're actually 187, if to be more precise. But I'll tell you, instead, I kind of developed those 5 that there are now 10. The number 1, by the way, was always empathy. Right. And empathy, when we talk about empathy, people typically confuse this, maybe because it sounds so much like sympathy or pity or compassion. And empathy is something else. Empathy is not feeling sorry for somebody else. Empathy, I tell people that babies and cats have something in common. They both believe that the world revolves around them. Babies grow out of it. Cats, not so much. You can see I'm not a cat person. But so as babies grow up, we teach them the golden rule, right? Do to thy neighbor what you'd like your neighbor to do to you. Which is, I love sushi. My wife doesn't. Should I take her to a sushi restaurant on her birthday because that's what I'd like done on mine? Not so much. And then we say, put yourself in other people's shoes. Well, you're not them. You're not the same size. You don't like their style. Empathy, true empathy, is your ability to see things from another person's perspective as if you were them, not you. And we lack in that dramatically. So your ability to increase empathy is one of those major ones. Another one is to own your side of miscommunications. What's communication? Right. I have something in my brain. It comes out of my mouth. Does it ever happen to you that what comes out of your mouth is completely different than what's in your brain? Absolutely. You go, did I just say this out loud? Okay, so it came out of my mouth, then it got all the way to you, and due to noise or something, what you heard was a little different than what I said. What you understood is different than what you heard because you have all your biases and all your influences. And what ends up in your brain is different than what had started in mine. Whose fault is it? Well, I can blame you and say that you didn't understand a single word that I said. Or if you're the one telling me something, I can say, you can't explain your way out of anything. What does it do? It puts you on the defense. On the other hand, if what I say is I own my side of miscommunication and I say, listen, I don't think that I explained it very clearly. Let me try again, because what you just said is not what I meant. Let me try again. You're not on the defense anymore. Or if you said something to me and I go, I didn't understand what you say. Can you try it again? I don't know this area. Once again, I'm not putting you on the defense. So, those are just 2 of them. And what started as 5 and then became 10. And in a series of mini books that I wrote called Can I Trust You? One of them is, 50 plus 1 habits that will make you a trustworthy salesperson. The other is 70 plus 1 habits that will make you a trustworthy leader. 67 plus 1 habits that will make you a trustworthy team member, and I'm going to continue and write those mini books because they come down to very simple habits, one-time habit. But my focus more recently became on the process, on how do you identify what is it that you're doing wrong? How do you fix it with a new habit?
Right.
How do you make this habit become a habit and not just something you're going to do for a week and stop? And that's something that I focus on right now. And I'm actually about, within the next, I believe, 3 weeks, about to release an online course that allows people to do that all by themselves. Just follow that course and you'll become trustworthy. More trusted, let me say more trusted, and this specifically is for work.
Okay. So that's okay. So what about reduce your sensitivity? Did we talk about that?
I did not, and I'm glad you brought this up because we're becoming very, very, very sensitive. So the caricature that I have in my head when I said that, and I hired a 13-year-old student to replicate this and included that in the book. It's these two boxers in a ring when the referee says, remember, no hitting below the belt, and one of them raises his pants over his head so that everything is below the belt so you can't hit me. We have a belt, and that belt is our sensitivity. Anything we say above the belt doesn't hurt us. You know, we just talk. We're talking, right? Anything below the belt, we become offended. We take it personal. We become emotional, irrational. And so if you, and this is kind of the final statement on that topic, what I tell people is, if somebody says something that hurts your feeling without the intention of doing so, it is 100% your decision to become offended, to take it personally, to become emotional and irrational with absolutely, but absolutely nothing to gain. Heck, even if they said something to you or did something to you with the intention of hurting your feelings, it is still 100% your decision to take it personally, become emotional, become irrational, still with absolutely nothing to gain. So lower your sensitivity, be less sensitive. It's going to help you take feedback. And remember one thing, good feedback makes you feel better about yourself. Negative feedback makes you better. But if you're too sensitive to it, you're not going to take it and you're not going to deploy it.
The one last one I want to touch on that one of my favorite quotes from your presentation is, fix the bad before working on the good. And I love that just because, yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. But I'm going to let you talk about that. Could you explain that a little bit more in detail for us?
Yeah, so I'll give it to you the way I typically do that in a workshop or in a keynote. I show it. You're familiar with the Better Business Bureau, and I show a review of a company on the Better Business Bureau. That company with more than 100 reviews, barely over 1 star. By the way, 1 star being the absolute minimum, and barely over 1 star. And I ask people, would you trust this company enough to give them your email account password? And everybody goes, no, absolutely not. Okay, let's put this aside. Second company, would you buy a barely over 1 star, again, with almost 200 reviews? Would you buy anything that costs $1,000 and should last for at least 3 years from that company? Absolutely not. Third company, an airline, still under 2 stars. Would you ever board an airplane flown by a pilot of this airline? No, I don't want to trust them with my life. And the fourth one is, I show them another one, barely over 1 star. This one has a special bonus. There are government actions against this company. Barely over 1 star. Would you buy anything from them? More than 1,000 reviews puts it over 1 star. And they go, no. And then I share who the companies are. The one you didn't want to give your password to was Google. The one you didn't want to buy anything that costs more than 1,000 words and $1,000 and needs to last for 3 years is Apple. The airline, best airline ever, Southwest Airlines. And the last company with more than 1,000 reviews, just over 1 star, government actions against them. You're not willing to spend 99 cents with them? Well, that's Amazon. How come? And the reason is, and there was a lot of research that was done long before me that says that we are a lot more prone to post a negative review if we had a negative experience than we are to post a positive review if we had a positive experience. There was the Losada ratio, which is also called the critical positivity ratio. They put the number at 2.9013. Actually, if you Google 2.9013, you're going to find the Losada ratio, and you're going to find articles that argue over their methodology and everything, like every paper that you're going to see. Then there is a theory that's called the prospect theory, developed by two Israelis, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, in 1979, both of whom received the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2002, said the same thing. We are more worried about positive, negative consequences than we are than we're happy or encouraged by positive consequences. Bottom line to this, if I want to be more trusted by you, I have, let's say that I have two options. Do one more good thing or eliminate one bad thing. Well, that one bad thing kills my trust a lot more than one extra good thing can compensate for. So I tell people, instead of focusing on let's do one more good thing in our relationship, Ron, how about if I identify, and it's hard, how about if I identify, Ron, tell me one thing that I'm doing bad in our relationship, because if I can fix that, I probably triple the impact I have on my trust than trying to do a good thing while still doing that bad one.
I love it. I could spend 15 minutes just on that, because that
I can spend 3 days.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. I mean, it's
stop me.
It's one of the things I talk about when it comes to surveying is that, you know, the online reviews will tell you how wonderful you are, a lot of them. But what they don't tell you is that the most difficult, they don't answer the most difficult question, and that is where could we improve and do better at what we're doing? Tell me how we can be better at what it is that we're doing. Well,
because your sensitivity is so low. If I tell you what you can do better, I'll tell you something. The Book of Trust was not going to look like this. This was not the design. I designed my own design. I'm very creative. As it turns out, the design was pretty crappy. I mean, this was a terrible design. And so, you know, when I say I'm very creative, I was obviously tongue-in-cheek. But so I posted it on Facebook. My first mistake, actually my second mistake. The first one was that I designed the cover myself. The second one was I posted it on Facebook and I asked for feedback. And I got feedback that was downright nasty. It was mean. But you know something? If you get above that, oh, this is offensive, this hurts my feelings, and now I take it personally, I become emotional and irrational. If I can get myself above it and say, you know what? But she's right. You know, bottom line is she's right. And another person that gave something that was really, really mean, and I thought, but he was right. And I hired someone who did the design, and then I modified their design, and all of a sudden I got this, which was like orders of magnitude better than my first, you know, ugly design. You have to be able to take that feedback to be better. But once you can, and you can improve, eliminating a bad thing has, I don't know if it's 3 times, but it is a lot more powerful than focusing on, let's do one more good thing while I'm still doing that thing that's really, really bad and really kills my trustworthiness.
Yoram, hold that book back up there for me, please. And tell people, how can they get that book? How can I get a copy of it?
It's easy. What you do is I'm going to send you a number for my account in the Cayman Islands. It costs $1,000. Well,
so I give you
Amazon.
My password.
Where do you get
I will give you my password.
Yes, give me your password. Well, you can buy that through a company that has barely more than 1-star review called Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's available. By the way, make sure that you get the second edition. The second edition came out actually earlier this month. The second edition came out, no, last month. It came out last month. And that second edition already has the 8th Law of Trust and a few other editions. The main reason why I got that book out, the second edition out, the same year that the first edition came out, the person who wrote the foreword to that book Sam Johnson. Sam Johnson was a fighter pilot, U.S. Air Force fighter pilot during the Korean and Vietnam Wars. He was shot down in Vietnam flying an F-4, spent 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton and was tortured for 7 years until he was released, served as a congressman, a U.S. congressman for 27 years.
Wow.
And since the time I gave him the copies of the first book with his foreword to that book, he passed away a few months ago. And so I dedicated the book to him. The second edition is dedicated to him. But you can find it on Amazon. You can go to my website, yoramsolomon.com, or alternatively, thebookoftrust.com. In our store, if what you need is not just one copy, but you need 100, you can get them at a special discount price. Or we even put bundles that Amazon would never put a bundle for, like the Book of Trust and the 3 books, Can I Trust You, and so on.
So, Yoram, if someone wanted to reach out to you to learn more, to ask you about speaking, coming to their group and speaking, or doing a virtual presentation, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
If you know how to spell Yoram Solomon, you found me. YORAMSOLOMON. Then you will find me, because I have a website, yoramsolomon.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Yoram Solomon. You can find me on Twitter on Yoram Solomon, on Instagram on Yoram Solomon, and on Facebook as Yoram Solomon. It's all there. Go to my website. In my website, you can actually see some videos from talks that I gave, workshops that I did, and what people think about them.
I love your YouTube page.
Trust is transferable. Trust is transferable. Don't trust me that I'm good because you don't know me yet. Go and see the people who attended my workshops to whom I delivered them and see what they say.
And as I'm saying, I love your YouTube page. There's tons of stuff there, and not only just.
Oh, you can find me on YouTube at Yoram Solomon.
Well, and that's actually, I mean, it's like, I mean, I could spend days just watching all the videos on your YouTube channel, and it looks like, and it's not just on trust. Again, you talk about. You have some technology stuff on there as well that people might find of value, especially if you're trying to use OBS. It's a great place to go. It's a great resource. Yoram, this has been awesome. And trust me, this has truly been an awesome conversation. I have so enjoyed it, and I wish we had more time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving of your time to join me today. And for those of you that are watching, if you have questions for me, of course, you can reach out to me at ron@ronruss.com. I'm happy to be of assistance to anybody. Just reach out and let me know what I can do for you. So until next time, folks, thank you so much for joining in on this conversation. It's been a joy, and I will see you next time. See y'all later.
Thank you, Ron. See ya.